Afternoon, live from Radio Row at the Mandalay Bay, Super Bowl 58. I'm Roy Kessel, along with Kayla Bradham for Sports Philanthropy Network. And now we're very excited to have a special Brain Health Summit roundtable. Looking forward to the Leigh Steinberg party tomorrow afternoon and the Brain Health Summit to start. So we've got Dr. Ryan Darcy and Dr. Wendy McNerney that are with us today to get this kicked off, this roundtable. So, Ryan, Wendy, thank you for being here and welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
So let's back up. I know the Brain Health Summit's been going on for a while, but I wanted to give each of you an opportunity to talk a little bit about how and why this is a topic that you're so passionate about. So let's start with Dr. Darcy.
Sure. Anytime you get a neuroscientist and ask them why they're passionate about the brain, you're in danger. We can talk for way too long. But we live in an age now where traditionally the things that scare you around whether or not you have an injury or you get a long-standing disease like a dementia, things are really starting to change, and we're really starting to be able to make real, I think, substantive impacts in everyday life, moving from the research lab and the medical hospitals into our everyday life. And in the context of Super Bowl, I think brain health is really important because we're shifting even to more about performance. How do we optimize that supercomputer between our ears, and how do we make sure that it's performing as optimally and as high performing as you'd like it? And so it's really exciting times that way.
Thank you for having me today. I have been attending the Brain Health Summit as an audience member for years. And every time I attend, I feel very, very inspired just to have a frank and honest conversation about mental health. As a neuroscientist, I firmly believe that mental health is driven mostly by biological factors, and that's something that we don't talk about enough. And to bring this to light and to have Leigh Steinberg do this and really, really just kind of begin to have a real dialogue is the best way that neuroscientists can come up with solutions to the problems related to brain injury and degenerative diseases. So I'm very, very excited to be part of this panel and to contribute my expertise onto the discussion.
One of the questions I would love to ask you guys, if you don't mind, is I always want to encourage young adults to find their secret sauce in life, right? And neuroscience isn't something that a lot of high school kids are hearing about. How did you guys end up in this space? And what would be some of the things that you would tell high school or college kids that are maybe thinking, wow, this might be a great opportunity for me to grow into and specialize in?
Thanks. A wonderful question. I can say that I was inspired in college. I was going to be a genetics major, and I took a general education class in neuroscience, and then just the lights went on, and this was like, this is what I'm doing for my life. Like I knew from the beginning. And then you have to think about in terms of how many different aspects of neuroscience there are, which there's human, there's biochemistry, all these different components. And I got to a section where we were talking about what happens when people lose their memory. And a long time ago, our great president, Ronald Reagan, when he ended up with Alzheimer's, I was like, no one should ever suffer from this kind of fate. So I'm going to do whatever I can to try to work towards achieving the goal of making sure that no individual has to suffer from a neurodegenerative disease. So I just found this like passion for with inside me. And I see that in younger students as well. I work with a lot of undergraduate students at Stanford, and I try to inspire young women to kind of understand and really, really feel what it's like to work on something that you care about to the point where you don't get sick of it. And the best thing is just to get it and get your hands dirty and start talking to neuroscientists. We love talking about brains with anybody, so don't be shy if you're interested. Happy to have that conversation with younger individuals.
Yeah, I think I can add to that only in the sense that in high school, I think, when you encounter biology, I always loved understanding how our bodies work. And I actually had a great biology teacher who he noticed, and he said, hey, do you want something in terms of a dissection project that's specific. And I had no clue. So I was like, oh, and he mentioned a dogfish. And all I wanted to do was go for the brain. I wanted to find out about that dogfish's brain, and that was my first knowledge. So if you have an ember when you're a young student, even in your high school or earlier, I think that thread follows in curiosity. Nothing I've ever done, really, truthfully, was a smart decision. I became a neuroscientist because I had phenomenal mentors who rubbed off on me in university, and I liked, I'm in brain imaging. I was scared of needles, and technology allowed you to peer in and not have to poke or prod. So I thought that was pretty cool. And, generally, I think at the end of the day, my advice for students is don't worry about what you become as a title. Really think about what you can do to improve the world from a purpose-placed part of things. And I think that's what I've been doing. I've been really trying to understand the brain so that we can actually improve people's brain health on a daily basis. And so that's how I ended up where I am.
And it's interesting because you talked about improving the brain, right? And you look around at medical technology for almost anything else in our bodies. We've got incredible technology to identify the injury or the risk or repair it or things like that. And, even with the brain, right? You can do brain surgeries, you can do everything else. But when you talk a lot about, the damage that occurs from concussive hits, subconcussive hits, right? There's still no easy way, right? People want, in today's world, they want to be able to lift up a phone and kind of just wave it over your head and get a red light, green light. You have a concussion or you don't, or wave it afterwards and say red light, green light, you're clear to go back in, and or you're not. And we know it's obviously not that easy, but there's been incredible developments over the last 10 years. And I know that there's, incredible work going on right now. Tell us about some of the things you're most excited to see that are coming, but haven't really hit the limelight yet, that you expect to see in the next 3 years.
Well, yeah, I can jump in. I certainly have been honored to be a part of the team that's developed the NeuroCatch scanner, which is a portable brain scanner, much like you described. And it is deployed throughout the United States and North America and worldwide. We are seeing where we can start to look at measuring your objective brain health rather than having to do a subjective error-prone guess. And that's helping us find new impactful ways to protect your brain and actually enhance your capabilities and worry less about the impacts of things like concussions and subconcussions. So it's a really exciting time to be living, and particularly in sports when you're worried about things like concussion.
So I'm going to take this from a different perspective. I'm a biochemist. So there has been great advancements in just being able to detect different level changes in proteins at very, very sensitive levels of understanding, which means that we have the potential to be able to detect thousands and thousands of different kinds of protein or changes in RNA gene expression from blood samples or from saliva samples in ways that we haven't been able to in the past. Just over the past 5 years, the new technology out there in terms of being able to detect these things are quite important. So what I envision maybe the next 5-10 years is that an individual will be able to provide a saliva sample on the field, maybe, and then we can put it into a measurement entrapment, and then we can potentially say, look, your biomarker levels have been changed. Potentially you should go out and have future evaluations. So I think we could potentially make an on-site biomarker-based evaluation, which would be very exciting.
So I find that so interesting, and I'll just give you guys a little bit of background information so that we can put some pieces together, because I look at the athletes, but I also look at regular people, right? So I'm a 51-year-old mother of 8 who's had 8 diagnosed concussions. So I have a lot of the same symptoms that our NFL players have with TBI, CTE, signs, things like that, the seizures, the migraines. Every time I go to a doctor, they're like, oh, we have a pill for that. We have a pill for that. Everything just sort of contraindicates everything else, right? So the migraines make the ADD symptoms unbearable, right? So for regular people, let's switch gears from the athletes and talk about regular people. what can regular people who are watching this, because let's be honest, most of the people who are watching this are regular people. What can they do to, number one, protect their brain? Number two, maintain their brain. And number three, reverse the aging of their brain.
Great question. Number one, to protect your brain, in no matter whether or not you're in sports or not, we're really understanding that your brain is dependent on and benefits from more focus on diet, sleep hygiene, and healthy living. For sure. That's emerging. In addition to promote and recover from, let's say, having a history of past concussions, we are seeing increased treatment improvements with people who have chronic problems with concussions in their history. So there are now technology innovations out there that are successful in helping those individuals. And the third thing I think is around the ability to actually continue to worry or not worry about the long-term effects of brain health. I'll pass it over, I think, to Wendy because she's the expert in that area.
Thank you. Actually, Dr. Darcy, you're pretty correct. I 100% agree with everything you say, but I want to add, in terms of something that an individual can do to reduce risk for long-term damage, degenerative disorders, post-concussive syndromes, take care of their mental health. So those individuals who have an anxiety disorder or maybe sleep disturbances are much more likely to suffer from post-concussive syndrome if they do indeed sustain a concussion. So the first thing to do is try to decide, am I sleeping well? Do I have a lot of anxiety? And if not, really try to figure out what to do to take care of that problem, seek medical help as necessary. That's one of the biggest things we can do just to prevent long-term negative consequences in terms of, taking care of your brain. And everything else that he talked about in terms of eating right, getting regular exercise, and you don't even have to exercise as much as an athlete would have to, right? So go for a jog for 20 minutes every day. Even if you're, your 40s, 50s, 60s, just make sure that you stay active so your brain can get the neurotrophic factors it needs to stay healthy and regenerate.
Well, Dr. Darcy, Dr. McNerney, thank you so much for being here for this roundtable. We're going to go to panel number 2, and we look forward to seeing both of you at the Brain Health Summit.
Thank you so much.
And we're back with the second panel for the Brain Health Summit, and live from Radio Row at the Mandalay Bay for Super Bowl 58. I'm Roy Kessel, along with Kayla Bradham for Sports Philanthropy Network. And we're very excited to dive into more conversation about brain health for this Brain Health Summit at Leigh Steinberg's party. So on our second panel, we have Komal Ashraf, who is here with us, as well as Dawn Brown. So Dawn, Komal, thank you for being here and welcome to the show. We've got so many issues to talk about surrounding brain health. And so the first question we have, is why did you choose to get involved with the Brain Health Summit? Komal?
Yeah, well, thanks for that question, Roy, and so happy to be here. Thank you for having us. I decided to get into health after an experience I had when I was in the 3rd grade. My dad, as a physician, would come and educate the classes I was in, and he brought a brain, and I got to hold it, and I got to see how influential he was in helping people recover. And I fell in love with the brain after that, and my core values, loving science, loving to learn, loving people, just kind of led me to medicine. And I've loved being a physician.
Dawn?
Yes, again, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. I actually failed my medical boards 5 times in medical school and was diagnosed with test-taking anxiety disorder and a little above average IQ. And later in my fellowship, my child psychiatry fellowship, I was found to have moderate ADHD. And I couldn't believe it. How was this missed? I was 33 years old and graduating from medical school. How could that be missed? And so I became very passionate about learning about my own mental illness. I actually went to 3 psychologists because I just couldn't believe it and I was in denial. And then I actually just was committed to become an expert in the field on ADHD. And so that's what I actually do. I'm an expert in the field of ADHD. And I found that working with, different populations, including elite athletes, I have a second practice mental athletics, that many actually were coming in with symptoms similar to ADHD. And so not just ADHD, but other mental health illnesses. So it was very important for me to have representation as a psychiatrist and having discussions, the hard discussions that we definitely need to have about mental health, because there's different types of treatment that people can benefit from.
So I just want to say I love this. I was diagnosed with ADD, ADHD. They keep changing the way they say it, but in my 40s.
Yes.
And I had 8 documented concussions, seizures, migraines. Every time I'd go to the doctor, they'd be like, "Oh, we have a pill for you." All of those pills made every other pill I took worse. I was living in a cloud. And it was just, I had sunglasses for this and migraine emergency rescue pills for that and earplugs for this and you name it. But I was a single mom with 8 kids. And it affected the way I was able to work, the way I was able to take care of my kids, the way I was able to handle the chaos, the cleanliness of my house. I think sometimes we forget that mental health, ADD, brain function, cognitive function, they're not just NFL problems. They're everyday working people problems. And we sweep them under the rug because we're ashamed. Like, we're still in this place where we're saying 1 in 5 people deal with mental health. And I think in your experience, everybody you're working with, it's probably 5 out of 5 people have some type of brain thing going on. Can we normalize brain health? Can we talk about wherever person is now, right? Somewhere on the spectrum, how can they prevent things from getting worse? And how can they be proactive in making their brain more healthy? Can we talk about that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I think you raised up a lot of great questions, Kayla, and a lot of great points. So, I am also trained in epilepsy. So, I see people that have brain injury for a lot of different, reasons that might have epilepsy secondary to something, have brain injury secondary to something. And I think that, again, you raised up a lot of good points. I have actually many things that I could talk about of that. I think pseudobulbar affect is huge. It affects the frontal lobes. It's much different than traditional depression and anxiety. And I think sometimes with that, trying a medication, I think that there's just misdiagnosis or under evaluation of different entities. And it's just thrown into the usual barrel, when in fact it could be a completely different entities. And that comes back to like the core of neurology for me, which is the history. You talk to a person long enough, you ask the right question, you get to know what they have. And so kind of parsing out those things. But then to answer your question about, what I hear you saying is, what can build a resilient brain for anybody from general population to peds to adults? And then if there's an injury on top of that, what
Mm-hmm.
validate our memories. It's what helps to rejuvenate. We know that crucial hormones and chemicals are released during good sleep. So I think that's really important. All the different levels of sleep, addressing and to build a resilient brain. And then also fitness is really important. At least 30 minutes a day, 3 times a week, super important to fit body, fit brain. I think good nutrition is also important. So I'm doing a study looking at post-concussive nutrition supplements, things as simple as creatine or fish oil or turmeric, things over the counter that people can use. So I think nutrition is also really important. And then maintaining healthy networks and communities and communication, because that keeps the brain networked and rejuvenating. And so then after someone has a head injury, we address the core 5 things: sleep, their mental health, their cognitive health, their eye and body movements, and then pain, head and neck pain, and address it in a very multidisciplinary, patient-centered, customized plan to help them recover what they're used to.
Yeah. Excellent. I would also add to build the mental health circle bigger. I would less likely see you because you have a concussion. You would more likely see a neurologist. And we actually, as psychiatrists, focus on emotional health. When you're talking about concussion, like a traumatic brain injury or insult, you would typically be referred from your primary care doctor to a neurologist. So if you recognize that there are some emotions, because ADHD actually has emotional regulation, we actually took it out the DSM-5 about in 1972. We need to put it back in there because we're missing a lot of individuals, particularly women. And I'm actually doing studies in women with ADHD because I was diagnosed at 33 years old. And so it is important to understand that most of us are misdiagnosed, diagnosed late, not diagnosed at all, or mistreated, mismanaged. We're managed for bipolar disorder, we're managed for anxiety disorder, depression, and nothing's working. And like you're saying, you're a mom, you have multiple hats. Who do you go to talk about these things? Who's listening to you? And so, at the end of the day, that's why I'm here, because I want to have the conversation. Come see a psychiatrist. We're here. We partner. I mean, Komal and I were just talking about this simple conversation right before you asked. It's interesting how a lot of symptoms overlap. And so I think that the mental health circle also needs to reflect that. And therefore, we would not miss these type of typical symptoms.
All right. And then this is my last question. It's definitely geared toward the women, but I think it applies to everybody. And that's the shame, right? Like, I don't want to go to a psychiatrist because I don't want them to tell me you're crazy.
Right.
And we know that this is more predominant in Black and brown cultures than it even is in white cultures, right? So we sweep things under the rug. How can we normalize it's okay to admit that you're having problems with your brain, and it's okay to tell your doctor? I don't want to fill out those forms when I go to the doctor and they make me check the boxes. I don't even want them to I don't want to fill them out because I don't want them to refer me to somebody to tell me your brain's not doing okay, something's wrong with you. Last question: how do we normalize talking to our doctors about where our brains and our mental health are at?
Yeah, I would definitely say that everyone is on the mental health spectrum. So what we need to do is clarify what is mental health and what is mental illness, because they're completely different. Mental health is basically rated as good, poor, fair. It's what Komal was talking about, how your nutrition is, how you're sleeping, are you socializing? Are you actually exercising regularly? That actually helps determine our mental health. When you're talking about mental illness, you're talking about specific criteria that actually is interfering with your day of functioning. And so it actually affects you. And sometimes it affects you in a way where maybe talk therapy is not necessarily going to be as helpful as adding or adjuncting with medication management, because now you're experiencing clinical symptoms that are very difficult to manage. I will also say that I love the adage that it's okay not to be okay, but we need to move from that and start saying it's also okay to see someone so you can be okay. Because we need to start treating it. We need to stop talking about it and mobilize individuals to have access to care, to talk about options, to get rid of these stigmatized words, and to start talking directly to what they are: mental illness. We need to normalize these words: mental illness, mental condition, mental disorder. We need to be able to be comfortable in saying these words so that people feel comfortable in talking about it, and so they can get the help they need and deserve.
Well, Komal and Dawn, thank you so much for joining us here as part of this Brain Health Summit Roundtable. We're very excited to be there tomorrow and participate in the Brain Health Summit at Leigh's event as well.
Thank you.
We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank
Can I
you.
just add to that
Yes.
to what Don was saying, if you don't mind? I just wanted that was all correct and spot on, and I wanted to bring it broader out a little bit. As a neurologist, it's a health literacy conversation.
Mhm.
It's educating patients, it's
Yes.
educating the community, and I try to be involved in advocacy work and philanthropic work because that is the platform for educating people and addressing health literacy. So I talk about mental health, mental illnesses, sometimes as it relates to the brain too. So after head injuries, we can see injury to the frontal lobe. It is extremely tangible, and so it's and how A connects to B, and I think that's part of health literacy. Also, likening it to like diabetes, or likening it to high blood pressure or cardiac disease or breast cancer, or all these other entities that we know have to some degree been accepted and normalized. And I have this conversation a lot with understand people thought they were possessed with a seizure. So we have to understand globally that this is a health literacy issue, and it's all about educating. So Roy, thank you for letting me interject there. I know you were probably trying to tie it
God
up.
bless you.
No,
Thank you.
we
God bless you.
appreciate both of you being here with us. We're excited for the Brain
Thank you.
Health Summit, and we're gonna flip it over to Leigh and Nicole to bring things home. So thank you both.
Awesome.
We're excited to be here live on Radio Row, Super Bowl 58 from Mandalay Bay for the third segment of our Brain Health Summit Roundtable. And now we have the two stars of the show. We've got Leigh Steinberg and Dr. Nicole Roberts, who are headlining the summit. Thank you for being with us this afternoon.
Of course.
Happy to be with you.
This is something the two of you started putting together now almost a decade ago. It's really evolved into one of the centerpieces of your party, Leigh, and it's been a great addition. I know brain health has been one of your passions for athletes for quite some time. Tell us how you got started with that as really the cause that you wanted to pursue.
So I had a crisis of conscience back in the 80s, representing half the starting quarterbacks that kept getting hit in the head. We'd go to doctors and demand answers, but there were no answers. And so started holding sports concussion seminars to explore the concept of awareness, prevention, and cure, and had a series of these things. I had the enormous good fortune to meet Dr. Nicole Roberts, who's brilliant and committed and has a holistic view of how health and mental health fits together. And the seminars took on a new life and a new meaning. And if you should ask Nicole, because they planned a blockbuster group for tomorrow that will really be educational, I think, for people, and hopefully make some news.
Well, I mean, none of us would be here but for Leigh. And as he said, this is something he started literally decades ago. And over the years, there's been so much advancement in neuroscience. And yet at the same time, we're also still having some of the conversations that we had decades ago. And so it's just incredible that every year Leigh gives this platform to people on the cutting edge of science and research and sport, and really gives us a space to come together and honestly talk and get to know each other. The partnerships that come out of this are unparalleled. And even years later, I'll get an email or a call from someone saying, hey, I'm working with so-and-so that we met at the Brain Health Summit 5 years ago, and we're going to do XYZ. And every year, the reward, it just compounds.
Yeah, so I love this because we keep talking about the new mouth guards, the new helmets, the research at UCLA, right? And we're still seeing guys like Tua laid out on the field. And I know it's always controversial, and I know it's football and it's tackle football. What do you guys, the two of you, see in the next 3 years that's going to keep pushing brain health forward, right? We know where we were, but where are we going?
Well, I can't answer the sports side, right? That's somebody else's area of expertise. But when it comes to the research, I think in the 90s, actually in 1990, Bush declared the 90s the decade of the brain. And in a presidential proclamation, he promised by the close of 99, we would have Alzheimer's, all these things completely cured. And then we saw very little movement in these spaces. The last couple of years, I have, for the first time in a long time, been truly excited by the research that's coming out across the board from pediatrics through end of life care. And so I think these next, I don't know if I'll say 3 years, I don't know what window to put on it. The rate at which science is compounding on itself is just incredible. So, I mean, I think we're on the cusp of so many new things in the next few years. And of course, then it's up to leadership and sports to catch up to the science, which can be really difficult.
Lee, you've been involved in looking at a number of different experimental types of treatments and things that may help, right? So the technology and the science from a pure medical side is really accelerated, but there's also been a proliferation of all kinds of new treatments and protocols that would probably be considered outside of standard medicine. And those are, I know that's something you've been passionate about exploring.
So we're in a revolution in biomed where the rate of change and discovery is not linear anymore, it's exponential. Everything builds on everything. And so this increased knowledge of the brain has led to an understanding of neuroplasticity, the ability to actually grow new neurons and rewire a brain. There are a couple of treatments, and I'm not a doctor, so you can talk to Nicole about whether I'm, just talking nonsense. But there's a process called RTMS, which is magnets against the brain, which measurably helps to rewire the brain. And before this, I used to speak in babble, but then I did the RTMS, and all of a sudden, I'm able to articulate. The other one is brain training nestry Lake Nona. And I actually went and did that training, and it was really amazing. And so there are breakthroughs happening, neuroplasticity, that concept. Now, on the football side, we're experimenting with not having young people play tackle football. We're experimenting with whether or not you could run a football program with no contact or hitting except during the games. So you don't hit during preseason, you don't hit. They've done it in the Ivy League.
Is that what the Ivies are doing? Sorry to interrupt you, but okay,
yes.
That's what I thought.
And
Yeah.
June Jones did the same thing with the Falcons. So you model the plays during the off season, you model plays during the season, and you just hit when the games are there. That would eliminate 40% of football concussions. So we're seeing amazing breakthroughs. And what Nicole has done is to continually reshift our focus slightly and take different aspects of this. So one year we did women in and concussion. Another year we took it from another standpoint. And this year she's got something bigger and better than ever put together. She's got 2 panels.
True. Well, as he said, each year we do our best to really lean into the host city. So he mentioned like the year was women in sport. It was Minneapolis. It was an inherently purple Super Bowl. So we just went all out focused on women in sport, women's brains. Other years you can imagine, say in Texas, we've leaned into veterans and the overlap with athletes. And so this year we have a wonderful charity partner, and that is Special Olympics. And said he would love to talk about neurodiversity. And so this year, Leigh has added all kinds of stuff to the event, but it includes an esport tournament. And what this has opened up is this opportunity for us to, we're affectionately calling it, I know, like a cognitive combine. And so in real time, we've got athletes of all different gifts and abilities competing in different ways, and some of it, a lot of it, is in reaction times, and it's mental. It's not just how high you can jump or how fast you can run. And so this year has really opened so many cool avenues to explore what is elite performance, how do we train our brains, how do we think about elite performance and brains, and it's going to be really fun.
Well, we're really excited. We know that you guys have a crazy busy schedule. We're very excited for the Brain Health Summit, seeing the esports competition, incorporating the philanthropy element into the event as well. And we appreciate being able to partner on that. Special Olympics coming in, groups to tackle hunger, fight human trafficking, everything of that nature. And so we know that that philanthropic element is something that's one of Leigh's passions as well. So we'd love to have you just share a couple minutes about that and why you started working with athletes to, incorporate their philanthropy into their careers.
So the point about sport is that individual athletes and sports in general can make an impact on the larger world and target different problems and causes. And we're really excited to have the Sports Philanthropy Network back at our Super Bowl party for another year, inspiring people and getting them to think about what they can do in their world to make the world a better and nicer place.
Well, Nicole, Leigh, thank you both so much for joining us today. On behalf of Kayla Bradham, I'm Roy Kessel, Sports Philanthropy Network, reminding all of viewers and listeners and everybody here on Radio Row to live generously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank